In the grand estates of Europe, the aristocracy ruled through land and title, upheld by strict social order. Their power wasn't just wealth, it was a system of enforced ignorance and dependence, binding society into a hierarchy they alone controlled. But their tools, titles, inherited privilege, and isolation of the lower classes, couldn't adapt to the industrial age. The revolutions of the late 18th century, most famously in France, shook the foundations of their power, showing that the masses could challenge the nobility's dominance. But France wasn't the only place where the aristocrats faced challenges. In the United Kingdom, the Reform Act of 1832 marked a turning point. This act expanded suffrage and shifted political power away from the landowning aristocrats to the rising middle class, ultimately weakening the traditional elites. These uprisings paved the way for a new era as the Industrial Revolution emerged, bringing with it a different kind of elite. No longer rooted in inheritance, power shifted to those who could control the machinery of production and exploit the labor needed to fuel it. The Industrial Revolution was a wave they couldn't hold back, a force that would soon see them replaced. With the rise of factories and machines, wealth began to concentrate in urban centers, shifting power from the land-bound nobility to the industrialists and capitalists who controlled this new economy. The aristocracy was sidelined. Their tools no longer fit the times. A new elite took their place, not through inheritance, but through the ruthless exploitation of industry. And while they may not have had titles, their grip on society would become just as ironclad. But this wasn't a clean transfer of power. The industrial age brought brutal working conditions that sparked resistance. Social movements and labor unions arose, not to dismantle feudalism, but to confront a new, far-reaching exploitation. These movements posed a real threat to the industrial elite. Unlike the nobility, these capitalists knew they couldn't rely on outdated forms of control. They needed new tools to suppress a more organized urban population. Industrial elites turned to media control. By owning newspapers and influencing journals, they crafted a public image of stability while casting labor movements as dangerous. This wasn't subtle persuasion, it was narrative control. Political lobbying became another blunt instrument, used to twist policy in their favor and resist any regulation of their profits. This wasn't finesse, it was brute force disguised as influence. They backed laissez-faire economics, not as ideology, but as a shield to protect their capital. After World War II, elites grudgingly tolerated social welfare systems, fearing unrest and revolution. The welfare state was never a partnership, it was a reluctant concession, a truce forced by the public's demand for fairness. But they never stopped undermining it. Over decades, through media, lobbying, and policy influence, elites worked to dismantle these protections. Welfare was chipped away bit by bit in favor of privatization, all while elites maintained their wealth. During the Cold War, elites seized on fears of communism to portray socialism as synonymous with repression. This wasn't a revelation. It was a continuation of their strategy to delegitimize any redistribution of wealth. By the 1980s, neoliberalism had taken root. Public services, once universal, became commodities. This was nothing more than a reconsolidation of power, repackaging social goods as private investments, reinforcing the same control, just under a different name. Today, elite control has grown sharper and wider. Digital platforms and networks amplify their reach, with algorithms shaping discourse itself. Lobbying has exploded into a billion-dollar industry, touching every level of government. This isn't a natural evolution of control. It's money-buying influence, a raw, unabashed continuation of elite dominance. They adapt not through brilliance, but through wealth, buying up every new tool as it appears. Power doesn't shift hands willingly. Each generation must confront entrenched control, facing systems designed to protect elite interests above all. The future is far from balanced, and the struggle for a fairer world remains an uphill climb. Generation after generation, the cycle continues, those in power refining their hold, while those resisting find new ways to push back. But history shows one enduring truth. Resistance endures, regardless of the tools used to silence it.